Our friend Milan sent us his regrets from Ontario, and he also sent me the quote from the famous his KGB friend who said, talking about ideological subversion, he said, to change the perception of reality of every American Canadian to such an extent that despite the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interest of defending themselves, their family, their community, and their countrymen. And so I think we can sort of see that as we look around everything we've been talking about over the last couple of days. So now we're going to let Alexandra talk about all the points that we haven't touched on from your speech, and you're going to talk about parenting and how we inoculate them from our education system, which seems like a horrible thought that we have to do that, but apparently we do. So Alexandra,
thank you.
Welcome.
We all know what political correctness is when we experience it, but we have to give it a bit of a thought to understand just how deeply its roots go and how pervasive it is and how it really affects so much of what we do and how we think. So what is political correctness? In short, it is a tool of progressive social engineering. While most conservatives try to conserve the values on which our society is built, they know that we are the children of the Magna Carta, that we are proud of this heritage and respect for our individual liberties. Conservatives understand that each and every individual is unique and has their own specialness and their own value. But in order to have a just society, each and every individual must be seen as an equal in the eyes of the law. So conservatives want to preserve these core values of our culture and build on them to improve. This is not so with progressives, who do not see anything positive in our heritage. They want to destroy our culture of individual liberties and with respect of all citizens being equal in the eyes of the law. Progressives are primarily collectivists. They want to destroy individual rights and replace them with group rights, giving special interest groups special privileges, making them different from everybody else, not applying the laws in one case while applying them in another. This type of group identity politics helps them divide and conquer, putting themselves, the technocratic elite, above the rest of us peasants, us unwashed masses, who don't even know what's good for them. The thing is, progressives know that in the marketplace of ideas, there will always be some people who will dare to want to make decisions of their own, to examine the actual data, to reach their own conclusions on how to reach happiness. This is very, very dangerous to progressives because they believe that they have a higher level of knowledge than the rest of us, and that they know better what's good for us. But what is more, conservatives tend to root their reasoning from the core principle of self-ownership. Each and every individual owns him or herself. Then, from therein, you derive the natural rights, especially the negative rights of not being deprived of bodily integrity, and so on, property rights, and so on. This is very different from how progressives reason, because to them, the end permits any means possible. So they don't have this grounding in values. They see what they want to achieve, and they are really quite willing to sacrifice individuals in order for the greater good, which of course is greater good in what they think is the greater good, and what those individuals cannot possibly understand is good for them, right? And so when there are individuals who dare to speak their mind, this becomes very dangerous to the progressives. So instead of attacking the ideas that these people may bring forward, usually people who argue from principle, they attack the person themselves. And by vilifying the person, destroying their reputation, making them persona non grata in society, they achieve two ends. First, others will be afraid to associate with them, thus singling the individual out, and if I can go back to an earlier metaphor that was used, having them be the single pencil that's easily broken. And at the same time, they warn everybody else not to be so uppity as to voice their own opinions. This is why people who dare question the progressive dogma are attacked, and why it is so difficult for individuals to speak up. Media is beginning to be afraid to be associated with people who speak up, because it's becoming increasingly, if you are associated or if you stand up for the rights of somebody whom you may disagree with, you are automatically associated as being that person. For example, if you stand up for the free speech of a vile person like a Nazi, you will be said, oh, well, you're a Nazi, you're enabling Nazism. But that is not true, because if you take away the right of speech of people you disagree with, you will be next to lose those very same rights. So, what do we do to protect our young ones? Just like a virus, political correctness is omnipresent in the world today. It is in our schools, our workplaces, our movies, our TV shows. It permeates every aspect of our culture, and just like a virus, it infects the very way our body works, our brains function, our minds think. And just like when you step on a rusty nail and you get infected with typhoid fever and you get lockjaw where you can't move your mouth or speak, political correctness causes its own type of lockjaw, self-censorship that starts first with speech, but ends up with rewiring your whole brain and the way you approach issues and evaluate them. Eventually, if you've been only exposed to politically correct patterns of speech, thinking outside of those bounds becomes physically unthinkable. Those neural pathways will simply not have been laid down. And we have to make sure that they are there for our young ones. There is hope. Just as we inoculate our children with a vaccine against typhoid fever when they stop on that proverbial rusty nail, or physical rusty nail, there is a way to inoculate the children against the mind virus of political correctness. The younger, the better, but it is never really truly too late. The trick is simple. Just like a medical vaccine uses bits of the dead virus skin with the particular patterns of proteins in the skin wall for the antibodies to imprint on, learn to recognize, and then fight against, so we must break down illogical, politically correct ideas into small little bits of illogic and feed it to our kids from an earliest age, and have them detect it, learn to detect faulty reasoning, and protect their mind from it. So, okay, maybe this metaphor is stretching things a little bit too far. Maybe you're saying this is more easily said than done. But I never said that this will not take a lot of effort on your part, that the parents, the grandparents, the aunts, the uncles, the friends of all the young ones, you have to have a very much hands-on approach. It requires you to take an interest in building up the immune system of their mind. But I suspect I'm preaching to the chorus here, because the more conservative parents or people who are interested in the young ones are, the more hands-on approach they take to teaching them and raising them. And the less likely they are to hand them off into early education specialists' hands, where they will be indoctrinated in political correctness before they can develop the mind defenses to protect against it. I know this may seem obvious, but it is important to say so. The best way to teach the kids is to not only talk to them about right and wrong, this is right, this is wrong, but explain why and tie it back to core issues. I know it's difficult when the kids are young, but if you just tell them, don't pick your nose, well, it's wrong to pick your nose. If you touch your mucous membranes, you'll spread germs and then you'll get sick. Oh, okay. So you're doing it so I don't get sick. I understand that now. You have to, and kids, they're able to absorb so much more than we give them credit for from the earliest age. And if you talk over their head, that's okay for the first bit. At least they know that you're answering questions, you're taking the time to explain. Sure, it's important to establish a emergency voice, where you tell your kids, okay, if I tell you this in this voice, there's an immediate danger, I'll explain later, just obey. So that, if there's a car coming and you say, get here now, they don't say, why? But you have to fulfill that expectation of explaining it afterwards, so that they know that they will always be taught, they will always be taken and taught in a respectful way. They will never just be ordered to do things. And the more time you take, the better. Be prepared to be ready with arguments that will make sense to them. For example, when my son said, well, why are you telling me not to jump on this? If I hurt myself, it's me who gets hurt. Why would it matter to you? Who'd have to clean up the blood? Oh, I guess that makes sense. But eventually they'll come to trust their own idea of questioning and not just blindly obeying authority. The next thing you need to do is feed them little bits of incorrect information. For example, when I would be helping out in English as a second language classes, I would always try to work with the kids who had the least amount of English. And there you would go, point to different colored crayons and say, green, red, blue, orange, green, red, blue, orange. And the kids would repeat green, red, blue, orange as you say it. You can see after a while, they're just mind-numbingly. So you say, green, red, orange, blue. And they go, green, red. And again, you have to say, all right, well done, you caught it. They go, oh, really? And you have to do that even with your own kids, with colored blocks, or this is house, car, cat, bike, in the little books. And say the wrong thing. And if they catch you at making a mistake, reward them, praise them for it, say, all right, awesome, you caught it. And if they don't catch it, repeat it with a significant look. Orange. And that way they'll know, oh, that's a cue, something to look for. And then learn to examine things, because you want to teach them to examine things without being suspicious and fearful and afraid, right? So you have to make it a game, and like we said earlier at the conference here, do it with a smile. Make it a game, make it a very fun game. So that is important. The answer is teach them with humor, because one thing that tyrants cannot stand is humor. Whether it is not really a coincidence that the other side of the Iron Curtain people were sent to jail for telling jokes. Islamists, they don't particularly take well to jokes either, especially to cartoon jokes. So, in the same way, collectivists who are politically correct absolutely hate to be mocked. So mock them, make jokes, but teach your kids to make jokes too. Of course, you have to teach them to do it carefully, and that when you're in school, you have to be careful. You go to school not to learn new material. You go to school to learn how to present what you already know in a way that's going to be acceptable to the society and great. Because you want your kids to survive, but you also want them to understand the underlying principles. You teach them right, you teach them to have a game, to examine what everybody says, not just people you disagree with, people you agree with as well. Because then when you reason out what was said, they say, okay, this logic makes sense. That logic does not make sense. This is reasonable, that is not reasonable. This I'm not sure about, I'll reserve judgment. But you're building up their ability to trust their own thinking from an earliest age on, and to not simply be recipients. There's another problem, I think, with our education system, and that is that we divide children by age groups. And in each classroom, the expectation is that the child is a passive recipient of information from an authority figure of the teacher. And this goes on year after year after year. And this trains young individuals to grow into citizens who blindly accept authority from above, without daring to question it, and without really relating to their peers except in how the authority evaluates them. In the past, when children used to be raised in communities, you would have extended family groups where children of different ages would be together and they would be taught, but the older kids, or the ones that are particularly good at a particular discipline, would be expected to instruct the younger ones in it. And that teaches them to not be simply passive recipients of information, but to also teach. And through teaching, they derive great self-worth. Okay, maybe I'm not as good at math, but I'm really good at poems. Or maybe I'm not really a good writer, but I can really figure out puzzles and I can help other kids how to figure out puzzles. And each person gets a reputation of their area of expertise. And this builds, because they're helping others, they understand their place within the society. Sure, it starts out by age, but it soon works itself out. Some kids are more responsible, some kids are a little more free, more fun, but each one will have give and take. So they are now being prepared to be an interactive member of society, instead of just someone who passively receives orders from above and obeys and performs to please an authority figure. Instead, now they're part of an interactive community. So if you're going to raise children, if you have to send them to school, but get them involved in after-school activities where they will be part of an age group which is gradual. So there's at least 4 or 5 year gap in that group. It's not all just peers, because they need to learn how to accept being mentored as well as how to mentor, instead of just passively receive and do what they are told. And that, I think, are the very necessary tools we need to teach children. How to be interactive members of society instead of obedient cogs in it, and to build up their self-worth through giving to the community and acknowledging that they can recognize when things are illogical. They examine what is being said to them, don't accept it blindly, test ideas, figure out if it makes sense, and learn to argue from first principles and derive their rights from therein. Thank you.